Ohmdenosaurus. Extinct species of reptile. Ohmdenosaurus, Ohmden lizard, is a genus of sauropod dinosaur that lived during the early Jurassic epoch in what is now Germany. The only specimen, a tibia, shin bone, and ankle, was discovered in rocks of the Posidonia shale near the village of Ohmden. The specimen, which was originally identified as a plesiosaur, is exhibited in a local museum, the Urwald Museum Hof. In the 1970s, it caught the attention of German paleontologist Rupert Wilde, who recognized it as the remains of a sauropod. Wilde named Ohmdenosaurus in a 1978 publication. The only known species is Ohmdenosaurus liassicus. One of the earliest known sauropods, Ohmdenosaurus was quadrupedal, four-legged, and already had the columnar limbs typical for the group. It was small for a sauropod, with an estimated length of 3 to 4 m, 10 to 13 feet. Its relationships to other sauropods remain uncertain due to the incompleteness of its remains, though one study found it to be a eusauropod. The Posidonia shale was deposited within a shallow inland sea and contains abundant and well-preserved fossils of marine reptiles, including ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs. Ohmdenosaurus was a terrestrial animal, and the specimen must have been transported by predators or water currents at least 100 kilometers (62 miles) from the shoreline to its site of burial. It is the only dinosaur fossil known from the shale. History of discovery. Second fossil of a terrestrial saurian to be discovered from the torsion. Between the tibia and astragalus, the specimen also preserves a limestone geode that is rich in the mineral pyrite and contains fossils of the snail Coelodiscus. Like all sauropods, Ohmdenosaurus was a quadrupedal, four-legged, herbivore with a long neck and tail. Wilde estimated the total body length at 3 to 4 m, 10 to 13 feet, which is relatively small for a sauropod. The tibia is 405 mm, 15.9 in, long. The bone preserves projections that served as attachment sites for muscles, including the nemial crest, which projects by about 4 cm, 1.6 in, from the upper front of the bone, and the crista lateralis, which runs for about 13 cm, 5.1 in, down the upper half of the shaft but is mostly broken off. The upper end of the tibia is oval in shape when viewed from above, with a width-to-length ratio of 1.4. The lower end of the tibia is rotated by 90 degrees relative to the upper end. The lower end of the tibia is formed by two rounded, well-separated prominences, the medial, inner, and lateral, outer, condyles. The medial condyle is much larger than the broken, lateral condyle and located c. 2 to 3 cm, 0.8 to 1.2 in, lower than the latter. The astragalus is 140 mm, 5.5 in diameter, sandal-shaped, and rotated by 90 degrees out of its original position, exposing its upper surface. This surface has two concavities, a larger medial and a smaller lateral one. The latter was located about 2 cm, 0.8 in, higher than the former. These concavities received the medial and lateral condyles of the tibia, respectively. A furrow between these concavities is thought to have been an attachment site for ligaments of the ankle. The much smaller calcaneus is 43 mm, 1.7 in diameter and 15 mm, 0.6 in maximal height, and circular in shape. Its probable lower surface is convex, and its probable upper surface is roughly textured, indicating the presence of a cartilaginous covering. Below the lateral condyle of the tibia, Wilde noted several other small elements 5 to 30 mm, 0.2 to 1.2 in size, which he identified as cartilage given their grainy and irregular surfaces. Unlike bone, cartilage is rarely preserved in fossils, and in this case might have been preserved thanks to the absorption of calcium salts. As these elements are located close to the attachment site of the Achilles tendon, the area of the ankle that experienced the highest stresses in life, Wild argued that they may represent sesamoids, small structures embedded within tendons. Alternatively, they could be calcified pieces of the cartilage of the astragalus. 2012 compared Ohmdenosaurus to the Australian genus Rhedosaurus, noting that the tibiae of both genera are relatively slender as seen in later sauropods, unlike the more robust tibiae of other early genera. As Rhedosaurus is geologically younger than Ohmdenosaurus, the latter would have been the earliest known sauropod with a slender tibia. The astragalus of Rhedosaurus was found to be more similar to Ohmdenosaurus than to other sauropods. Sebastian Stumpf and colleagues, in 2015, reported fragmentary sauropod remains from the torsion of Grimmen in northeastern Germany, including 4 elements of the pelvic girdle and part of a vertebra. Although roughly contemporaneous with Ohmdenosaurus, they cannot be directly compared to the latter because they do not include elements of the hind limbs. The Grimmen remains do, however, resemble the early sauropod Tazidosaurus from Morocco, while Ohmdenosaurus appears to be closer to Rhedosaurus. Stumpf and colleagues therefore suggested that Ohmdenosaurus and the Grimmen sauropod were not closely related to each other. In 2020, Oliver Rauhut and colleagues included Ohmdenosaurus in a phylogenetic analysis, but found it to be unstable as it was placed in different positions in the tree by different variants of the analysis, both within and outside of Sauropoda. Michael Sims and colleagues, in 2021, suggested that Ohmdenosaurus might be considered a nomen dubium, dubious name, due to the incompleteness of its remains. In 2022, Omar Regalado Fernandez and Ingmar Wernberg included Ohmdenosaurus in a phylogenetic analysis that placed it within Eusauropoda, a group that comprises most sauropods except some very basal forms such as Tazidosaurus. Within Eusauropoda, Ohmdenosaurus forms a clade with Amygdalodon, Spinophorosaurus, and Folchiomyria in this analysis. The following cladogram shows the possible relationships of Ohmdenosaurus according to Omar Regalado Fernandez and Ingmar Wernberg in 2022. Taphonomy. Wild, in his 1978 description, attempted to reconstruct the taphonomy of the specimen, the events between the death and final deposition of the individual. Such reconstructions are important for the understanding of the formation of the Posidonia shale as a unique fossil deposit. The tibia of Ohmdenosaurus shows 2 excavations caused by weathering that are 2 to 5 cm, 0.8 to 2.0 in, deep. These excavations are located on the sidewards projecting upper and lower ends, but only on the medial, inner, side of the bone. This indicates that the bone must have laid on its lateral, outer, side and partly covered by sediment, only exposing the most protruding parts of the other side to the elements. Because similar weathering traces are not seen in other fossils from the Posidonia shale due to the absence of currents near the sea floor, the weathering likely took place while the specimen was still on land or near the shore, perhaps in a river delta. Based on this evidence, Wild concluded that the specimen must have been transported and deposited twice. First, it was transported from its place of death to the first site of deposition near the coast, where the weathering took place. This transport is indicated by the presumed partial sediment cover, which indicates a site where sedimentation took place. The second transport to its final site of deposition far off the coast could have happened through strong currents near the surface. Wild, however, considered it more likely that scavengers such as crocodiles or plesiosaurs brought the specimen to its final site because of the massiveness of the tibia and the considerable distance to the coast. It was probably only during this second transport that the carcass got separated. The tibia and ankle were still articulated when found, indicating that soft tissue was still in place that held these bones together when the specimen arrived at its final site. The snail Coelodiscus that was found with the specimen could have been a scavenger feeding on the decaying soft tissue. Paleoenvironment. The Posidonia shale at Holzmaden was deposited in a subtropical inland sea at c. 30 degrees north with a water depth of 100 to 600 m, 330 to 1,970 feet. The nearest landmass, the Vindelition High, was about 100 kilometers, 62 miles, to the south. Ohmdenosaurus is the only known dinosaur fossil from this formation, and other evidence for terrestrial life in the shale is scarce. Several flying animals are known, including the pterosaurs Dorygnathus and Campylognathoids, and one layer contains abundant remains of dragonflies and net-winged insects. Although driftwood is frequently found, other plant remains are rare.
ये दुनिया मनहूस लोगों से भरी हुई है।
Conifers and the now extinct benetic.
आप कुछ भी करने लगेंगे, आप कहेंगे मैं सोच रहा हूँ कि अपना काम शुरू करूँ। लोग कहेंगे अरे पागल मर जाएगा, अरे पागल, तेरे खानदान में किसी ने किया? अरे तेरे बस की बात नहीं है, अरे छोड़ दे, तुझसे होगा ही नहीं, मैंने पहले